There'll be bluebirds.
Been looking forward to this for quite some time, especially Bernard. He read this book weeks ago. Said, Sid, you got to read this book. You're going to love it. And I did. The book is Soaring to Glory, a Tuskegee Airman's first-hand account of World War II, written by Philip Handelman, and the hero that's set to join us momentarily, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart, Jr., who served with the Tuskegee Airmen, went on to fly 43 missions in World War II, and is here today to talk about those heroic efforts and this wonderful book. Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart, A, thank you for your service, and B, welcome to the Bernie and Sid Show this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Colonel Stewart.
Nice to have you.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
So, I know you're going to be 95 years old. God bless you. Coming up, of all days, Independence Day, which is ironic. July 4th is your birthday, and so you were 20 years old, of course, on this day, 75 years ago, June 6th, 1944. All these years later, Lieutenant Colonel, you wake up in the morning. What does this day mean to you?
Well, it means that 75 years or 70 years have gone by in a very fast time. It got here before I thought it would, But anyway, it brings memories back of my services in World War II, the invasion, which I did not participate in at the time, but I was in the service there, and I was training as an aviation cadet to be a fighter pilot.
And very interestingly, Colonel Stewart, your history, of course, your grandfather was born into slavery. Your family moved early on to New York City, first Harlem, then Corona, Queens, where you grew up in the Depression, in an integrated neighborhood. It wasn't bad. And your love for flying developed because you lived in close proximity to LaGuardia Airport, and you take it from there.
That was named North Beach Airport at the time there, and the name was changed. Theo LaGuardia was the mayor at the time, and I think it changed in October of 1939 to the name LaGuardia Airport. I used to walk down to the airport and watch the planes take off and land, hoping someday that maybe I could go ahead and pilot one of those planes. And sure enough, World War II came along, and I took the examination to become a aviation cadet, and did get my wings, and did go overseas with the 15th Force, flying P-51s for escort missions, and that was about it.
Yeah, you flew them all, P-51Bs and P-51Cs, and eventually the newer ones, the P-51Ds. But I will ask you this, Lieutenant Colonel, when you, in fact, did at 18 years old go to Tuskegee, I know you talk about you were living there on the college campus. You were actually enjoying college life. What was your very first impression of your brothers in the Tuskegee Airmen group?
Oh, most of them were older than me. Most of them had been going to college, and I held them in high esteem and absolute awe. And I tried to emulate everything that they were doing and follow their lead. And it was a brotherhood, and big brotherhood and big sisterhood that was very momentous in my life.
And of course, Colonel Stewart, it wasn't without some heartache when you did finally enlist or join the Air Force, the Army Air Force. You took a train with some of your buddies down to the South, and you experienced a shock when you changed trains at Union Station, I believe, in Washington Square. You started to experience some of what was happening in the South, and while we were at war, and you're going off to fight.
That's right. We started out from Corona there, as downtown New York from Penn Station as an integrated group. And when we got to Washington, D.C., which was also what was known at the time the Mason-Dixon line there, a conductor walked up to me and said, "You'll have to go up into the first car, which is the Jim Crow car, reserved for colored people." And I didn't protest at the time there. I knew that was a system that took place in the South there. But my friends who were coming from the neighborhood also and going in the same down to Mississippi also said, "Well, we'll come up there with you, Harry." And the conductor said, "Oh no, this is reserved for white people here, and he'll have to go up into the Jim Crow car." So that was my first introduction to Jim Crow.
You know, I wonder, again, talking to Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart, hero, and his book is out, Soaring to Glory. When you left Tuskegee and before you went to Italy to start serving and flying those 43 missions, you had to go to South Carolina for a short time. I wonder what was that experience like in terms of some of the racism you had to face, as Bernie just talked about, on your way out of New York?
Well, it was the same. I went to Walter, South Carolina, but I was determined that I would not go off the base. And when I say off the base, mix into the neighborhood that they had in Walterboro and the other neighborhoods there, only because I didn't want the embarrassment and the humiliation that would come from the anyway.
Yeah, the racism.
The racism, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so I did go from there overseas. I went to Virginia to catch the boat to Italy, and that was it.
So we're talking with Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart. The book is Soaring to Glory, a Tuskegee Airman's first-hand account of World War II. Speaking of which, you go off to Italy. Now you have a better reception amongst your fellow servicemen. You're in Italy, and as Sid mentioned, 43 missions. You're escorting bombers to bomb sites in Germany, very dangerous. And one day you get into some dogfights with, and you end up winning the Distinguished Flying Cross for it. But tell us about that day.
Well, it was quite an eventful day. There were 7 of us that were flying in the P-51Ds up near the Danube, up near Austria, in Austria, near Vienna at the time there. And we were attacked by a horde of German fighters, FW-190 aircraft. 3 of us were shot down. One, his plane was just damaged, that's all, and he managed to get back to friendly territory in Yugoslavia. The second one was killed instantly when his plane was shot down. And the third, name was Walter Manning from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was shot down, but he was able to bail out. A mob picked him up and threw him in a local jail in near Linz, Austria. And 3 nights later, the same mob came back and dragged him out of the jail, beat him up pretty badly, and then hung him from a lamppost.
They lynched him. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Well, as you say, the good news is that out of that, to this day, they still keep that gentleman in their memory. They have a memorial there for him, and they still talk about it even today, yes?
That's correct. And I must give credit to the Austrian government. Just about a year ago, they created a memorial to Walter Manning there, and it was very, very impressive memorial, and it's a permanent memorial.
Thank God. And your wingman was okay throughout all these battles, but I do want to talk about those 43 missions. You have been credited, Lieutenant Colonel Stewart, with shooting down 3 enemy planes, but one of them really brought back memories of Top Gun, something you competed in, by the way, in 1948, later in your life, but you had a plane behind you, and he had you set in his sights. I mean, you were literally seconds away from death. He had you, and I guess you had to do some type of maneuver, and in the end, he ended up crashing his plane, and he died, and that turned out to be your third hit, I guess. I gave you credit for that. Talk about that specific experience.
Yes, he over-controlled anyway. I had already gotten 2 aircraft, and as soon as I got them, I found out this guy was on my tail, and I couldn't shake him. And I dove for the ground. I got as close to the ground as possible, and I was doing some pretty violent maneuvers down by the ground there, and he was following me, but as you said, he had me dead to right, and I thought I had it, and I looked back one time, and I saw this mushroom flame, and he had hit the ground, and evidently he had over-controlled and spun into the ground.
And, of course, again, the Soaring to Glory is the book, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart. Lieutenant Colonel, after the war, you stayed with the Army Air Force, as they called it, and you were on an exercise with a squadron. You were forced to bail out over the Deep South in Appalachia. I believe it was Kentucky.
Yes.
And you hurt yourself in the bailout. And tell us that story, because it is one that it reinforces our faith in humanity.
Yes, I bailed out over a place called Butcher Hollow in Kentucky, and the plane crashed about 100 yards from the home of a young lady by the name of Loretta Lynn, country singer.
Sure.
But anyway, I had come down in my parachute, bailed out, and I guess it was about 2005. I got a call from that town, Van Leer, Kentucky, and the gentleman said that he was a historian, that he was not quite 3 years old when I bailed out in a crash there, but there wasn't much news about it except a rumor about this plane that crashed, and wanted to know if I could go ahead and bring him up to date on that. And I said, well, what was the rumor? And he said, the rumor was that a black man had stolen a B-52 and was making a bombing raid on the town, and the American fighters went up and shot him down. Well, I fell off my chair.
Not exactly correct, yeah. Well, you talk about black man. We'll wrap it up with this. You would think with all the missions you flew, escorting bombers in World War II, if you can do that, you can certainly fly Delta Airlines. And I know that when you got home, you wanted to fly, obviously, commercial flights, and they were not hiring African-American men to do that. Obviously, that's changed, thank God, over the years. So really something as simple as, Lieutenant Colonel, seeing an African-American man as a pilot for Delta Airlines, that means so much to you, doesn't it?
Yes, that's correct. That's right.
Well, thank God they relented, Delta and TWA. They finally ended up hiring black pilots in the 60s, and you went on to a storied career with some aviation outfit, and it's very successful. Anyway, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart, the book is Soaring to Glory, a Tuskegee Airman's first-hand account of World War II on this D-Day, 75th anniversary of D-Day. We commemorate with you, and we're honored to do so, sir. We thank you for your service and everything you went through in the 20th century and the 21st century. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart.
And thank you.
Thank you. There he is, the hero, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Stewart.